A very warm welcome to all our viewers from NNI Sports. Today, the topic of discussion is a pretty intense one, and that is the element of heat and humidity, the weather, which is playing a very crucial role where athletes are concerned. Our editor, Sandeep Mishra, is joining me on this show. He was in Tokyo. He kept talking about the impact of intense heat and humidity there and how it actually had a major adverse sort of effect on a lot of athletes where their health is concerned. Sebastian Coe, president of the World Athletics, he has himself mentioned about he has raised this issue, and he should know it very well because he has 4 Olympic medals under his belt, a double gold, and he has expressed concerns over heat and humidity. Sandeep, since the topic of our discussion is racing against rising temperatures, athletes versus climate change, Sebco has been openly mentioning this, and there were a couple of tweets that followed. What are your immediate thoughts?
No, this is coming. I think we've been seeing this for almost 3 to 4 years. In India, of course, when people complain about the heat and all, I think it's not a surprise because most of the national championships, most of the athletic stuff normally is held during the summer months out here. So the timings for India, I don't know whether the climate change really, it's going to be kind of taken into consideration by the AFI and SAI and all of that, and they kind of sit down and try and ensure that something is done about it. But worldwide, I think it's something that everybody's really concerned about because apart from the hosts, I think it also affects health a lot, and you could see it out there. Performances were extremely close. I mean, if you could really think of World Championship, which had all the thrills and everything, Tokyo was one of those. I mean, tremendous championships out there. You take any event out there that really went to the wire, most of them, at least 90 to 80% of them went to the wire. I mean, athletes were going out of their skin, coming out of it in a way to probably, make it to the podium. But there's one thing that really happened down there was that timings were affected. One can also argue about it in a way that in a world championships, in the Olympic Games, sometimes creating records is secondary for a lot of athletes because making it to the podium becomes priority. But having said that, most athletes, 80 to 90% athletes, didn't complain, but they did say that the heat and the humidity, you can sometimes, kind of say 30, 32 degrees is really not hot, or 33 degrees is really not that hot. But when it comes down to humidity at 90%, which is what I think Sebastian Coe also speaks about, that is the time when physically you are completely drained. And that was shown in the longer distances. It was there in the marathon and all of that. Close finishes, of course, but timings were affected. So I think going forward, you will see changes as Sepco says that maybe marathons will be held in some other city which is probably cooler. But I think shifts of most of the major championships will probably happen by a month and a half to at least get athletes to perform at optimum level, perform to a point where records are going to be broken. Otherwise, why hold championships or why hold them in such heat and humidity?
During the World Athletics Championships in Tokyo, we had a couple of discussions with coaches and other experts. I remember when we were talking about Gulveer failing in the 10,000 meters quite badly, obviously affected by the intense humidity, and you were there. You yourself were talking about how difficult it is for journalists to traverse 1.5 kilometers up and down to reach the venue and then have a chat, and also the lack of air conditioning inside, which makes it even more difficult. But let's talk about Gulveer. His coach spoke about the fact that maybe if he had trained in India or in similar conditions to Tokyo rather than training in the US, it may have helped. But I have a very simple, possibly a layman question. We talk about acclimatization. Can an athlete ever get acclimatized to, like you said, like a 80 to 90% humidity? It's taxing. It can destroy any human being, and that too a competitive athlete who is racing against the best in the world.
Most Europeans actually train for that. I mean, if you look across 5K, 10K, Even the steeplechase, most of the Europeans that we spoke to were saying that, wearing three jackets, four jackets, and then training in Sweden, training in Norway, training in all those Scandinavian nations where, even in the summer, it'll probably be 23, 24, 25 degrees. Humidity doesn't go to that extent. It does become hot because for them also staying in a house that doesn't have a fan at that point of time makes it stuffy, but they were training for that particular point, they were training for that month, they were training for that city, so that they could actually bring their bodies to Tokyo physically and be able to run in those kind of temperatures, or at least run in those humidity factors. So I think in that way most of the athletes were prepared. Listen, I mean, I think for them, doing this research is something which is second nature. For their coaches to do this research is second nature. For them to figure out how to get the maximum out of our athletes, or for a nation to ask or probably demand from the athletes, means also giving it to them, giving those kind of conditions to them, taking them to a particular nation, or getting that kind of condition in and around where they are training or their training basis is something that comes very naturally to them. I think when you look at Gulveer, the question was, weather was one point. I'll agree with that, because by the time you were hitting the last 400 meters, 350 meters, you could see that the man was sapped out. But at the same time, the point that we were making, probably a week back, was the intelligence part of an athlete to somehow be in a pack, where you're seeing other fellow athletes who are probably from colder countries to be able to do that. I think those factors really governed what Gulveer was going through. Coming to Gulveer, let me make it very, very clear. The man is talented. There is no doubt about it. It's sad. It's almost tragic that he couldn't convert the 5K and the 10K into something meaningful. My point about meaningful is not a podium. My point about being meaningful is very simple, that you got to be in the top six, top eight, try and make it to the final. That is where you kind of take a step forward. And I think to come back and say that temperatures were a factor, I think somehow kind of becomes more like an excuse, even though it may not have been an excuse in the sense that Gulveer really felt it. So the discussions that we had at that point of time, then why Colorado? When you're going to
Yeah.
be training there and then coming back here. But the silence around it post Tokyo is what is most stunning. That on one hand you have the world president saying that climate changes and all of that, and on the other hand you have a completely quiet Gulveer, you have a completely quiet personal coach, you have a completely quiet establishment that refuses to even come forward and say, okay, this is what happened in the world championships, and this is why we couldn't convert. I think that is required, because otherwise what you do, what we all try and assume what could have been, and when you
Yeah.
do that, then certain people in certain places in certain chairs then get affected, then they kind of get upset, and then they say, hey, this is critical. It is not critical. It is simply an examination. It is simply an analysis of what went wrong or what went right. Here I don't think a lot of things did go right. Let me put it very straight. I mean, the high jump was marvelous to watch. Sachin's fourth place at the javelin was tremendous. So there were things that were going right, but I think a larger part of the contingent went wrong there, and those are the
Okay.
answers that we look for.
Let's move beyond specific athletes and talk about possible solutions, because we are talking about athletes all over the world getting affected by heat and humidity, and how they, like you said, that the European athletes train very hard to acclimatize themselves to different conditions, wear jackets, sweaters, all of that is happening. Let's talk about India. NNI Sports has attended several events of late in Sangrur, Jalandhar, and one of the first things our reporters and crew members talk about is the intense heat. And there are events which happen from 2 p.m. onwards. Even in Ranchi, on day one, our crew spoke about the pole vault, and they said it was The heat was so intense, so blinding till the rains came and added its own dash. So, specifically speaking, what can India do to choose high altitude centers, and is that a solution?
No, it's you need to look at that. I mean, those are not solutions. They are there. They're right there. It's in your face. I mean, you got Himachal, you got Uttarakhand. I know there are some centers out there. I know the training happens there. But I think the amount of money that we are spending on stadiums all across the states, and which is which to my mind is okay, is wrong. You know, you cannot be building stadiums which are 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 capacity stadiums, and then you're not giving the adequate facilities to your athletes. And I'm talking of state specific here. Why not have high performance centers across these two states, or wherever they can train at high altitude? And look at high altitude as one point. I'm talking about weather conditions, that when they are training there, when they have those coaches with them, when they have those facilities with them, that is the time when they should be hitting Europe, and then when those results start coming in, that's the time when the athlete feels confident. How does an actually athlete feel confident when he knows that he hasn't entered a final and there are certain factors that are stopping him? You know, I think even in Tokyo, uh, even though the weather conditions in the javelin final at that time, it was windy, it was raining hard. Sachin overcame those factors. Neeraj couldn't because of his back injury, and somehow made it to the fourth spot. Is a very, very, very positive development. I think that is where I think our focus should be there, that you need to give them that kind of exposure, where it is just not athlete to athlete, where it is just not competition to competition. You're giving them those exact factors that will propel them to the top six. That is crucial. You need to give them those weather conditions also. You can't just throw them into the deep end of the pool and then say, okay, now it's time for you to swim and beat Ian Thorpe. No, you can't. That is impossible.
Let's move on to the news which has come in that Tamil Nadu sprinter S. Dhanalakshmi, who returned to competition this season after serving a 3-year doping ban, has reportedly tested positive again. And this means that a repeat offense could mean a lengthy suspension and major setback. Dhanalakshmi, at 27 years old, had recorded her personal best of 11.36 to win the women's 100 meters in Chennai last month, and her ban ended on the first day of last month's Tamil Nadu Senior State Athletics Championships. She also stood at the top of the podium at the Indian Open in Sangrur, where NNS was present. So, Sandeep, when we are talking about uh, doping ban and athlete again testing, what does it actually mean that in physical terms?
No, I think the moment the news hit, it was it was Sarangi's report in the Sportstar Hindu that came out first. And apart from being a breaking news, because in so many ways it is a massively breaking news, because you have a woman who 3 4 years back was beating Duti, was beating Hima Das, was doing 11:40, 11:50, 11:30. I mean, those were the timings that she was recording, and one could see the strength, one could see that she had that potential in her. Now you can always say that potential plus dope. There's so many uh, the points that one can gather and make a whole negative story out of about it. But it's ridiculous to have an athlete who gets through a ban, comes back, and then again is caught for dope. I think it's not only tragic, it also shows that there is something very deep down wrong in Indian athletics. There's something very deep down wrong in the way coaches are putting some points across to athletes, and not only the top-notch athletes like Dhanalakshmi, who at one point of time was the next big thing to hit Indian athletics. But I'm afraid, I mean, we all probably who are interested in track and field are afraid that this is probably happening at the junior level in so many ways. Maybe some people are not getting caught, and maybe some people are getting caught, like Dhanalakshmi being caught. This woman, 3 4 years back was getting admission into a Canadian university. You know, Kristen Worley, who had once come on the Ekamra Sports Literature Festival, part of the Canadian cycling team at one point of time, she somehow got her or ensured that she will get admission into a Canadian university for sprinting. They looked at her timings, they saw her training methodology, they saw everything. They spoke to a mentor in Chennai, sorry, in Bangalore. I'm forgetting the name of the guy, and to her coach also. And they all said, yeah, she will go 11 and below 11 at that point of time. And then suddenly she decided that she doesn't want to go. And within 6 or 8 months, I think it came out that she was caught for dope. Now, for to come back and then again take dope, I mean, what do you say? I mean, like, this is bizarre. I mean, this is madness that is happening out here. And I had to say, I think, I don't know. I mean, this is an opinion. Okay, this is just an opinion. Then maybe it is time for the state association also to put their hand up and say it's our fault. That, okay, we take a hit. Now, what is that hit that the AFI can do? I mean, you're willing to ban the coach, you are willing to ban the athlete. I think there should be some penalty points for the state association. Otherwise, this is just going haywire. I mean, all the doping and all of this, it could be happening to anybody out there. I mean, is this a shortcut to success? Yes. But is this a long term formula for any athlete to probably do, which includes all the athletes? I mean, look at DP Manu, look at Shivpal. All so much of promise. At one point, you thought they were the next Neeraj Chopras. But where are they now?
Okay, last pit stop on this show is something pleasant, something nice, and which is Manikant Hoblidar in the 100-meter sprint. So his timing was 10.19 seconds. Just to give a perspective to our viewers, he not only got the gold in the men's 100 meters in Ranchi, but also set a new meet record, bettering his own 10.23 seconds. So he shaved off those extra seconds. And it separated he's just zero point zero 0.01 seconds away from Animesh Kujur's national record of 10.18. Also, the 100 meters is known as one of the as the sexiest sprints in athletics, in track and field, and stars are made. So we have Animesh Kujur, we had Gurinder Veer, who's now struggling with injuries and trying to make a comeback. What do you think, Sandeep, of these timings? And is there a possibility that pretty soon an Indian sprinter might be able to do a sub 10?
Sub 10 comes from competition. I think they all, if they're willing, if they're running these timings in India, I think just imagine if a group of athletes, Animesh, Gurinder, Oblidar, I mean, all these guys running somewhere where there's intense competition that ensures that they shave off, fractions and fractions and fractions and somehow get closer. It is not easy to come to 10. It is really not easy. It takes almost a decade. It takes almost a generation or two generation of athletes to somehow keep inching towards a 10. The big question is, like most timings across in sport, not only track and field, the moment you come to a particular point, which is 10, that's the time when you'll see a whole new generation trying to break 10. But this whole difference of the fractions, I think this is where the coaches and everybody should be focusing on. More than that, I think Sushant, who's in Ranchi, will also agree that it's also the making of a very, very good 4 into 100 team. And I think looking at the Asian Games and all of that, I think this is going to be one crack team out there to be running. We it's sad that the 4 into 400 still needs to be assembled from what we saw in Budapest at the World Championships in 2023. But I think 4 into 100, 4 into 400, these are events where India has a massive future. And if you have a bunch of 3, 4, 5, 6 sprinters who are all doing somewhere between 10:19, 10:20, and 10:30, then you actually know that you have competition in and around, and you need to send them in bunches. You really need to send them in bunches for some high speed training abroad. Otherwise, it's not a question mark on the coaches here. It's really not a question mark on the coaches here, but it's definitely the answers lie in high intense competition where each of them can understand what is the weakness that I have left that I can overcome? And looking at all of that, I think this is really good.
In very simple terms, within a sentence before we sign out, is there any possibility that in this current new generation of male sprinters, any possibility of doing a 10 or a sub 10, or we'll have to wait that much longer?
No, we'll have to wait that much longer. It's difficult. It is not that easy to do a sub 10. It requires science, it requires conditioning, it requires coaches, it requires tremendous amount of competition, it requires a huge amount of travel. And I think all of that, once it clicks, and we have seen that clicking with Neeraj Chopra. We have seen how various factors have clicked with him to be able to produce an Olympic and world champions. And I think all of that, and I'm not talking of an Olympic world champion here, at least in the sprinting area. But if you can create a 100-meter Asian Games champion, you are on your way. You are on your way.
Okay, we'll close on that and we'll be back soon with some more interesting aspects of track and field. There's so much to talk about, and we've already overshot our time. Sandeep, thanks very much for your incisive analysis and true to the core. And for the viewers, it would be very important for you to know that today's title was Racing Against Rising Temperatures. Athletes have to combat climate change. There are several aspects to it. The heat and humidity took its toll in Tokyo. There's no denying that. And like Sandeep was there from start to finish, says if you have a 32-degree temp plus 80 to 90% humidity, that's a massive call on a lot of athletes. Sebco, the president of World Athletics, also makes the point that we have to really seriously think about it and protect our athletes. That is work under construction, but we'll be back with lots more. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.